This is Hindsight and High Heels, conversations for women who have lived, learned, and are still becoming. We explore topics like leadership, life transitions, and how perspective evolves over time. I'm Anne Witkavitch. Thanks for being here. Today, I am joined by Anne LeMieux. I'm so excited about this. She's an award-winning author of about 12, I think, young adult and younger reader books. And they explore themes like identity, family, belonging, and finding your place in the world. And her latest novel is See the Music, Hear the Light. And it's inspired by her own family's journey experiencing Williams syndrome. It's a genetic condition, very rare, that shows up at birth. But the main character, Daniel, is just so wonderful. He's a neurodivergent teen, and he just has a heart and soul that I'm reading the book now, and I'm just in love with it. I think it's like perfect for any age. So, Anne, thank you for being here.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
You had experienced success as a writer early in your career, and then life unfolded, and there were some unexpected turns and experiences that reshaped how you thought life would have been, and also who you became as a person. And I think many women can relate to that there's things that happen as we move through life, and there's unexpected twists and turns, and they shatter our expectations sometimes. And in hindsight, we can look at the arc of our personal stories and we can see how they really contributed to who we were and who we become. And sometimes it's not who we expected to be. And so, what strikes me is that your work connects the dots between your early writing and then where you are now and how you've been able to bring all those life experiences in the middle into your new stories. So I want to start with a question. When you look back at the younger writer, did you ever imagine the personal path that your life would take and where you would eventually come to?
Um, it's that's a funny question. No, I don't think I imagined it, but um, in retrospect, I'm finding so many full circle. Like, aha, that's why I went through that because that brought me here. So. I always wanted to be a writer. First, I was a reader, and I always like my favorite characters. It was Jo March, the writer, and Anne of Green Gables, and Shirley, the writer, and Emily of New Moon. I always wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
I wrote my first book when I was in like seventh grade. And then I was, I liked research also. It wasn't just, fiction writing. Um, and then I got to college and was in a program that really fostered that. It was a special, sort of freshman experimental program called FEED at Simmons College, which is now Simmons University. And so I just like took off with the writing and also was very interested in the illustration. And as I mentioned earlier, made the decision to go mainly with the writing. So I minored in
Mhm.
illustration. And then when I got out of college, I did not think I had any original thoughts in my head. So I decided to study music. Then I veered off from there and I would write song lyrics, but I would never sing them, and I would play only instrumental music. That never came together for me at that time. And then I got sort of through the back door, I started writing articles about music and musicians and feature stories, sort of from, journalism, because I had, that was part of my college course. And other things I was interested in, and I did a lot on sailing. I interviewed Ted Turner once, which was kind of
Oh my
interesting.
gosh.
And I know.
Wow.
Um,
Timely.
yeah, yeah, I know. I still have that article. It's up on one of my websites, actually. It was a good article. But then when my son was born, I really wanted children's books. I loved them. I always loved them. They were always the books I liked the best, even as I got older. And so that's where I wanted to sort of focus. So I started writing. I wrote picture books. I went to conferences and I did all kinds of, all very directed towards becoming a children's book author specifically. I had written a short story and sent it to 17 magazine. It was called The TV
Oh,
Guidance
wow.
Counselor. So
Yes.
that was a
Cool.
short story, and I got a very nice rejection that said, not this time, but we're interested, so if you get something, and I just put it in the drawer like I did and moved on to the next thing. I think it was a picture book called I'm the Captain of My Ship. And then when Brendan was born, somehow I had always, one of my interests had always been physics and like
I like
quant.
physics too. Maybe it's something
Yeah,
about writing.
well, maybe, in research, but so I followed along what's going on with quantum physics, and I would read books and things like that. And I came up with this idea for a story, which turned into a book called The Unraveler's Song, which it was kind of it was in the sort of sci-fi fantasy genre,
Hmm.
um, semi-realistic, contemporary at the time, which was back in the uh, late 80s, early 90s. And it did not get accepted, but the idea had to do with uh, this force, this evil force in the universe that was canceling out the music of the spheres and was, like uh, anti, like the anti-music to sort of correlate to antimatter. And it had a little bit of merit to it, but I never was able to pull it together. And so then I went back to the TV guidance counselor and said, well, maybe I need to do some more work on this. And I turned it into a screenplay. And
Oh,
yeah, so that was my next step. I turned it into a screenplay. And so everything was all blocked out. And then I got some negative feedback from people whose opinion I shouldn't have even listened to. But uh, so I said, well, I'll show you. And I turned it into a book, which then became an American Library Association Best Book for Young Adults. So I was like, see, don't give
and
up. It might.
as I've shared with you, it's one of my favorites.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's out of print right now. I think it would need a little bit of updating.
Mm,
There's some things I would want to change
hmm.
40 years later, but that may be one that I'll bring back too. So those themes that I explored in the Unraveler song, and that became the screenplay that I did. You learn how to do the form of the screenplay. So
Right,
then it was like,
right.
okay, well, then maybe I'll go back and cannibalize this for parts and turn it into a screenplay. So I was always, kind of try this, try that, try this, which I'm not sure what you'd call that, either unfocused or highly experimental or
They
ADHD. I'm
call
not
it
sure.
experimentation today.
Okay,
It's
that's
like a cool thing, but which it is. But yeah, experimenting, being willing to try something and
yeah.
see what happens with it, and if it doesn't make it in its current form, recycle it into something else.
Yes, yes, I've always been big on that. And, so and I wrote some other books. I explored different interests of mine, and they turned into books for different ages, and they did reasonably well. And so that was all through the 90s. Um, and then, and Brendan was born in 1987, and he had a lot of, atypical health issues. None that were like the sort of like, oh, this particular cardiac problem is definitely indicative of Williams syndrome. He didn't have that. He had others, and very various other things that all made sense once we got the diagnosis. But it was so rare, and we hadn't heard about it. So when he was in, you know, over that period of time, my first marriage, well, sort of ran its course, and it had been, high school sweethearts, and then you make all the mistakes together, and then you realize this is not going to work for the rest of your life. So, um, so that was in the mid '90s that Brennan's and my daughter Sarah's father and I sort of dissolved that partnership. And and Brendan was not diagnosed at that point, but he had by that time he had like 7 surgeries for different things,
Wow.
weird, odd things like a congenital trigger thumb, and he had 5 hernias over the 4 before he was 2. He had heart murmurs. He had a very serious heart murmur when he was 3 days old, and we almost lost him. And
Oh,
so,
geez.
it was serious, and it was always it was an unknown, and that we got no answers from doctors that gave us any information. Anyways, and when he got to school, we had him in a private school for first and second grade, a little tiny private school, the same one Sarah had gone to. And he did really well in that format, but then we moved to a school district where, the 3rd grade gets a little bit harder, and they also have a whole lot more screening procedures. He would be in birth to 3, which is sort of identifies um, developmental hallmarks, and if they're not being met
Hmm.
and what that might mean, and how to, interventions that might be done. So that's when he got his first academic evaluation. We had him an earlier one when he was in kindergarten. And so there were again some unusual things, like he could remember the name of, like, in 60 seconds 40 animals, but they were unusual. It was like, oh, aardvark, ibex, dragon, and just not your dog cat kind of. So that and all these things. So his 5th grade teacher, he went through 3rd, 4th, 5th, and did okay, and was doing reasonably well with a little bit of resource from help. And his 5th grade teacher saw a special on 60 Minutes about Williams syndrome. And there's a very, once you know what it is, there's a particular aspect, and curly hair and sparkly eyes, and, button nose, cute nose, and, some other things that you think, oh, that, that young person might have Williams syndrome. They sort of have that, um, aspect. And so the school contacted me, let me know, and I didn't tell Brennan right away, but 6th grade was just so much harder. Middle school, I mean, so much more complicated, so much more of a cognitive load, just trying to get from one place to another.
And I
And
think I think it's also at that age, in general, it becomes much harder in school.
yeah,
So it's a
yeah,
huge talk about transition, it's a huge transition point in life, both for the children, but also for the parents of the children and the adults in their lives, because it's like this whole different world takes over.
right, right. And if a child has a vulnerability, or learning disabilities that are not diagnosed, I mean, it can be a really sharp cliff to. And so,
Yes.
we, at that point, I eventually made the decision when he was in middle of 6th grade to have the genetic testing done. After, I mean, it wasn't a short process to come to that decision, but, and turned out he had Williams syndrome. So that was in the year 2000, which was the year my last book that I had written was published. And I started on a research journey of what is Williams syndrome. And,
Right.
there wasn't all that much. I think there was probably about 2,500 um, medical literature articles dealing with Williams syndrome at that point that I was able to get a hold of. So I started doing research, and I was going backwards. What were the clues? Just questions, 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 far more than answers. But I would try and so I did a lot of nonfiction writing, like of my story, going back and rereading all my journals, and like, oh, there's a clue, there's a clue, and um, but it was Brendan was living this life, and I got to a point where I was like, I can't write about this. I can't. This is his life. I can't write about this. so I didn't write about that. And I did a couple of other projects. I I wrote a musical, the book and lyrics for a musical. The then found out that the rights would not be available until I think it's 2033 or something. So I was like, okay,
Oh my gosh.
in the drawer. It's okay. It's all right. But
That's in queue.
everything yeah, everything's a learning experience. But then, Brennan actually the summer after sixth grade, uh I had remarried at that point to one of my six brothers' very dear friends, and we're still together to this very day.
That's
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, it is.
Jack, I think one of the things about rare diseases is it's that journey
Mm,
that, people go through. I think it's 5 to 7 years before you can get to a diagnosis, and it's such a frustrating experience. And you had mentioned about looking back, what were the clues? And I think that's what a lot of people, it may not even be a rare disease, but there's just a lot of things in life that you go back and again, we talk hindsight, but you try to piece together what happened and did I miss something? But sometimes you just aren't going to be able to do that. And I think it's one of the vulnerable points that we have, that when we don't know the answers, we're gathering, you're doing all this research, but you can't stitch it together yet. And
not
sometimes
yet.
maybe it's an act of faith in life, and sometimes it takes a while to get there, but it's something I think is a very human thing, and particularly for women that we go through as kind of, I don't wanna say that not everyone's a caregiver, but women in particular tend to take that role,
Yeah.
for whatever reasons a little bit more, so
Yeah.
that's what was I was picking up that, like, it's just you're telling it here in a few minutes, but it really is this stretch of time.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And the journals. And, one of the books that I used during the divorce was The Writer's Way. And it said, you got to write
Oh,
your
yeah.
morning pages, 3 morning pages. Oh man. Like stacks of, and, now that like however many years later, it's like, oh yeah, this whole thing can go in the shredder. I mean, it's like,
That's
it,
that's the next transition phase, right? The shred
right?
machine.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Get those oily sheets ready. It's gonna be, um, but yeah, no, it's, yeah. I'm at a different point, But I would write things out. That was how I processed. Even now,
Yeah,
I'm surprised I'm not sitting here with a pen taking notes on us talking because that's how I process. I write, and I take notes on phone calls, and I take notes on conversations, and so, I took a lot of notes and some of them came in useful when I started writing the Medium essays. A lot of that was pieced together from that early research. And so that was in,
and
I
those
think
are your memoirs, right?
my memoirs. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
the Medium, which I'm rewriting because the research has exceeded even what I had done by then. But I started that in the summer of, 2023, saying, "Look,
mhm.
put this into a form." So Brendan was diagnosed. All of a sudden, the fact that he was so musical made sense because he had always been very, very musical. I come from a musical family, so he got like a double dose, but that's one aspect of Williams syndrome is the of musicality and sort of an innate musicality that can rise to the level of, surprising talent, uh,
Yeah.
if properly nurtured and so forth. So, so the music, uh, uh, Tim and I went to the Williams Syndrome Convention in Detroit in this June of 2000. And we did not bring Brendan with us because I didn't know what to expect. But after being there for a couple of hours, it was like, oh, we really should have brought him.
Yeah.
And there was a music camp going on at that time at a place called Belvoir Terrace in Lenox, Massachusetts, that had been started by two parents of young people with Williams syndrome. Howard Lenoff, who was a doctor of biology, I think, out at maybe Stanford, maybe Berkeley, I'm not sure, and Dr. Sherry Libera, who is a just a most excellent person, and English is her area, and so they got together with a woman named Nancy Goldberg, who was running this music camp, fine arts camp for young women. Um, and this gorgeous, lovely estate in Lenox, Massachusetts,
Oh,
and
the Linux.
yeah, just beautiful. And they had a Williams syndrome camp week at the end of each summer. So it was a whole week, and it was 50 young people. I think the age range was maybe 14 to 30, something like that. And my stepmom had found out about it and said, "Here, apply to this. Maybe Brennan can go to this." And so I did all the forms and I sent them in, and was told that, the camp was filled. I mean, the places were all filled. And then about 10 days before the camp was supposed to start, I got a call from Sharon Libera, and she said, a place has opened up, and we think Brendan would be, a really lovely young person to fill that spot. And that was when Brendan found his tribe. And that was a very, very joyful, it almost felt like a reunion to him, because it was all, there's a characteristic empathy among
Hmm.
people with
Yeah.
Williams syndrome, and not just the musicality, but the musical ones had been gathered all in this one spot. So that was really kind of very much in the air. Out of that, some years later, it was in 2007, Brendan got asked to pull together some people to play at a Special Olympics fundraiser.
Hmm.
And so he called some of his friends from camp who were older than him, like 3, 4 years older than him, but they all got together, and that was the first performance of what turned into the Can Do Band. And they played all kinds of things. So that occupied a lot of my time. Plus, in order to, I mean, I did not write Harry Potter or the vampire series, so my children's books they did nicely for, sort of mid-list books. So I started working as a paralegal, and I had research involved, and that I
Hmm.
ended up working for an elder law attorney, which was very useful as a parent of somebody with a disability to, I mean, it was very nice to have a weekly paycheck, because then it was more opportunities for Brendan and
Yeah.
other things, and I just wasn't feeling so creative in that. So we gardened, we played music. I got to play the bass and the rhythm guitar with the Can Do Band on many of the songs, which fulfilled my teenage dreams of being not a rock star, but I got to,
On
and we
stage.
on stage, right? And we and all my classical finger picking came in very handy at that point, because like, oh, I can play a bass line. That's easy. And but we did like school assemblies, ability awareness assemblies, a lot of advocacy. Gosh, they played at Tom Brady's charity football game 3 years in a row for the Best Buddies Hyannisport Challenge, and hung out with Guy Fieri. It was,
Oh my
it was,
gosh.
yeah, it was a great stretch.
I was
And
going to add that you got to do something with your child.
mm,
First of all, like, how wonderful that he allowed you to be part of the band. I
oh,
think that that's really great that that was something that was a connecting point for you too.
actually, I have to bring my daughter, Brennan's sister, into this too,
Oh,
because
yeah.
she's approaching, um, uh, hopefully what will be the final process of getting an interdisciplinary doctorate in music composition and neuropsychology. Yeah, so, but she's a fabulous
Yes,
musician in her
she
own
is.
right, and she has been Brendan's mentor from right from the beginning. When she needed a drummer in her band, she says, "Up, I grew my own drummer." So, and just, yeah, good drummers are hard to come by. Sometimes you got to grow
They
them, and
are, they are. I've got one, and, yeah, there it's and I love drums, I love percussion.
Yeah, yeah. So anyways, so the music piece, the Can Do Band.
Did this all kind of evolve into the book, which is so wonderful, and it just feels like it's taken these moments from your life and just woven them into this narrative by this tremendously optimistic, I read the voice of Daniel, and, it almost reminds me when I read, Andy Weir's books like The Martian or the recent one,
Oh,
Project Hail Mary, that I have such a distinct
interesting.
voice in my head, and up. It's so
Yeah.
optimistic, and that's how I'm reading Daniel when I read
Well,
the book.
I think fundamentally that's true, but it's through the sorrow and the pain that it has to
Yep.
persist. And as Brendan says, the struggle is real, you know. And
Yeah.
his comment when he finished this book was, "It speaks my truth."
Oh,
And
wow.
one of the big themes is bullying and the effect of bullying on peers and sort of I mean in the memoir I kind of examine that in a parallel track, like where does this impulse of meanness arise? And so I understand biologically where it arises from. I mean, I've talked to lots and lots of young people and people who are now older. I mean, like these people who were teenagers when I first met them are in their 40s now, and it's like, oh my gosh. But then again, I look in the
It's
mirror and
shocking, but we don't talk
I
about
know,
these things.
I know. So um, they all, so many of them have referenced being bullied, and I'm talking about, you know, a young woman whose own brother called her the R word in high school, you know? It's so
Yeah.
pervasive and unfortunate. I mean, I thought 10 years ago we were making great strides, and sadly, it seems like
Mm,
there's been a lot of slippage in terms
yeah.
of basic civility and kindness as a cultural tone.
I think slippage is a very polite but accurate word for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, things that we thought were gone are coming back. And
Right.
but so this book may be more timely, that because the bullying is really the point, and a lot of, and it is fiction. Daniel is a fictional character, but his experiences are very informed by the types of things that Brendan endured. By the time Brendan was a junior in high school, the bullying had got so bad, and even though he was in Best Buddies, but not that's not the whole world, I mean, and it
Yeah.
just in school, and there were some really nice kids, but that wasn't the culture, and it was just so, uh,
Your life, not just in school right now, but in the world.
yeah,
So, I mean,
yeah,
there's relevance across what you're saying is relevant across the board,
right,
adults
right,
and younger people, and yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so I couldn't really address it sort of head on and get Daniel's voice right. And, not just his external voice, which is characteristically Williams syndrome. They have a love of words and big words, and you would be amazed at some of the storytelling devices they use. Lo and behold, you hear that
Yes.
from but I'm just they like the sound of words, they like prosody, they like
Yeah.
and it's a natural fit with, so when you're talking to many people with Williams syndrome, it's just a lovely use of language that can sometimes make you really smile.
It was that kindness factor.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, how
that is
wonderful.
I can remember Brendan was when he was seeing the geneticist for the first time for a full clinical visit. So he would have been 12, just almost 13, I think. And, they do the thing with the little rubber mallet on your knee. And she put her
Yes.
hand on his skinny little knee and did the mallet through her hand to to be able to feel the reflex. And he looked at her and he said, "That's gotta hurt." And she looked at him and she said, "Well, yes, it does a little." I mean, it's a
Yeah.
perspective, a particular
Yeah.
perspective of that's very present in many people with Williams syndrome, in my experience.
I I love this. I wanna close with a couple of questions, and I wanna give you time to be able to, like, really think and respond. One of the things is as you look back on this journey, you've been a writer, a mother, a caregiver, a woman, a human. Um, what are those nuggets that you understand about yourself more now that maybe you could not have understood back when you were, in your younger self and when you were starting to write?
Um, I just that there that that what that the life I was living and all the different experiences that I was going through w- would that I would get to a point where I would look back and feel like there was a wholeness to it, and that a lot of things made sense uh, that I wouldn't. I was a curious child. I was always a question asker. Even now, I have a very good AI. Uh, it's not a person. Uh, question answerer. And that's so the philosophical things and everything that everything would come together, and I used to keep a quote book. I started doing that in college and I still have it. I'll
I
show you.
love quote books.
Oh my gosh. I bought this in Harvard Square in 1974,
Oh
I
my
think.
gosh. Oh my
It's
gosh, it's
covered.
beautiful.
Yeah, and it's almost full with quotes, mostly from my college years and early years. And there's some in there that I go to now. And one of them is the Rilke quote about in Letters to a Young Poet, live along into the questions and maybe someday you'll live into the answers. There's another one by T.S. Eliot from Four Quartets Little Gidding, which is probably the most significant poem uh of my, you know, life, because I found it when 1977, right after I got married. I bought the book up in Montreal. It's we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. And it goes on with some other things. Um,
That's gorgeous.
and all shall be well, and that's in there too. And that's the point to arrive. I feel to come back to these same topics that I was working on in the Unravelers song in some fashion. I've also dug out the musical that I wrote, and there's a lot in there, and it's like, oh, I can't believe I wrote that when I was 40 or 45, because that's pretty wise. And it's like you didn't know what you were talking about, or it didn't seem like you did. Anyways, it's sort of like letters from my younger self. And it's like I think I'm gonna, spiffy this up. We're getting closer to 2033 when the rights might be available.
I think
So,
I've had some writers on the podcast already, and it's funny that that is something we talk about. Is that you have these old things that you pull out, and some of them, like it's past. The train left the station, but there's these other things that you look at and you say, "Oh, this was never finished.
it
This
wasn't
needs to
right.
this
It
needs to
wasn't
go
right.
further."
Yeah,
Exactly,
exactly.
exactly.
The perspective hadn't ripened, and I'm doing that also with the screenplay, the Music of the Spheres, which is very, here I was back in the early 90s writing about um, this boy with this incredible hearing, which at the time I thought it was possibly autism, but it was just he was hypersensitive to, the music of the spheres.
I can see that, having a new life in the world today that,
Yeah.
there's a lot of readers out there for it. My last
Uh-huh.
question for you is going to be, it's really, I like to end on a question that's geared towards our women listeners, and it's about what would you want those women who might be feeling that at points in their life or transitions that they've had to remove or move away or move in a way that was different than what they had anticipated. But how would you say that they can get back to themselves, make sure that they keep themselves in the process, both in the hindsight and moving forward, of keeping themselves in their identity, even if that identity shifts from who they may have thought they were?
I'm a big fan of Elizabeth Warren. Nevertheless she persisted, as part of it, and as a mom, I think it's like you can't give up. So,
Mhm.
but just I don't know. I think you have to, I mean, I always I turned a lot to writing when I didn't have words. Sometimes I would do some painting, try and keep, I guess, your creative spark and I think everybody has a creative spark of some sort, something that, try and preserve a spark of joy,
Mm,
or
yes.
if you've lost it, take the time to try and find it, whether it's I'm not sure. I mean, for me it was always creativity, and making soup is can be creative, and I mean, like uh
I always see it as, from my personal perspective, that it's as you said, you have to persevere. You especially, if you are a parent, but you need to persevere through life even when it doesn't follow the script that you thought it was going to follow. But at the same time, when you said about finding joy, I think in hindsight, I have learned that sometimes you have to find joy in places that you weren't looking before,
yeah.
just because of how life has unfolded, and you
Yes.
find it.
Yes. And I go back also to the was it what is it the Eightfold Path? I think it's Buddhist, but anyways, it's try not to, I don't know, for me, n- try not to want the wrong things. It's like I'm just so grateful for a lot of small things, I guess, is
Well, and
um
gratitude. I think gratitude's something that I learned much later in life, where I'd
yeah.
hear people talking about it and I'd be like, "What's this gratitude thing?" But it's really, gratitude is being thankful, and it's living in the present too. I think in mindfulness they talk about that. It's like being in the present, and being
Yeah.
in the present and being grateful for what you have in the present, and then being grateful for what those past experiences, and I think you said it earlier, have brought you where it became a whole in this part of your writing,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is pretty cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I wanna thank you again for being here today, because I think what you reminded me and my listeners about is that we sometimes don't know the chapters that we are going to write, and we have to let ourselves be open to the experiences, and then seeing how that translates into that hindsight that we can provide to others. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate it, and thank you.
Well, thank you, Anne. It's been wonderful.
And I want to
Thank you
thank
so
all of
much.
the listeners out there. This has been Hindsight in High Heels. Hey, Ann, we've been talking a lot about your book. Do you have a copy of it handy that you can flash up so they can see the cover, which I think you
I
designed,
do.
right?
I did actually, and there's an explanation about it inside. And there's also there's a website for See the Music, Hear the Light. It's just seethemusichearthelight.com. And there's a link to the Williams syndrome and some of the research right on the website.
Perfect.
There's going to be a study guide that'll be up by the middle of August, and the ebook will be out in August. Right now, it's just Amazon paperback, but more is coming.